on this off day to kind of reset the board a little bit, if you will, and discuss what we saw the last 4 days out at Patriots training camp, so that when we get to Monday, we can turn the page to the new week of camp. But we'll start with the quarterbacks in here in a second. But Alex, it was great to be back out there. It was great to be back out there and see this team that Bill Belichick and company constructed on paper start to take the field and take shape a little bit. Even if we didn't get the full pad experience quite yet, it was good to see all these pieces kind of come together a little.
Yeah, it was great. I was saying that to Phil Perry on my Sports Hub podcast yesterday, that you are kind of starting to see the picture here. And
yes,
not that the moves were necessarily total head scratchers, all the moves they made this offseason, but we've seen in the past that maybe they bring guys in and the plan that they have for a player doesn't fit. The plan in theory doesn't take place on the field, but
right
early on, it looks like everybody's kind of the puzzle pieces are coming together. It seems like the roles are making sense. The usage is making sense. So it's very early to make any definitive statement on that, but nothing seems out of place so far. And that's good, because we've seen guys seem out of place as early as that first week. Michael Bennett, was it Mike Pennell? What was Pennell's first name? The defensive tackle.
Mike Pennell. Yeah.
Mike Pennell. We've seen guys kind of, Eric Decker, we've seen guys kind of be removed early in camp. I don't think anybody has stuck out. Even a guy like Nikhil Harry, who reportedly doesn't want to be here, although
right.
He made some interesting comments this week. Even he seems to kind of have his niche. So it just feels great. And then for me personally, I wasn't there last year because of COVID.
We missed you
because it was super restricted. So, to all the fans who came out, I'm sure it was a great experience. I shared that too. It's just, there's nothing like watching football practice. It was so nice to be back out there.
Right. And I kind of hit on this in my Sunday column that people can read on clnsmedia.com about the offensive pieces, especially the new offensive pieces, Hunter Henry, Jonnu Smith, Nelson Aguilar, and Kendrick Bourne, in my mind, really practiced as advertised this week, right? Like Hunter Henry was very good in the red zone work that they did, finding voids in zone coverage or working against man coverage on in-breaking type of route seams, in-breaker slants, things like that. That seemed to already be building a rapport, especially with Cam in the early going. Jonnu, later on in the week, you missed mini camps, so you kind of expected him to be a little bit slower coming on here. Days 3 and 4, all of a sudden we start to see him on those little shallow drag routes or crossers, take the ball and run with it. And you can see some of that explosiveness that he brings to the table. Kendrick Bourne has been fantastic. Absolutely fantastic. Open all practice long, almost a game long, all practice long, good hands, great route running ability, very smart player, instinctive player, just exactly what you think about when you see this offense. And then with Aguilar getting behind the defense, right, and stretching the field a little bit, certainly impacting the way that the defense has to cover deep. And the Patriots haven't really had that, I would say, out of Aguilar in his skill set, maybe since Brandon Cooks, right, in 2017, having somebody that truly can run like that and get behind the defense and go deep on a defense. So all these guys, even 4 practices in, like you said, the pieces are already fitting together and you already see the makings of a really good offense. And I said that they're going to be a good offense this year because even though we've seen some ups and downs and inconsistencies in the first 4 days on the offensive side of the ball, you can see the plan and you can see the blueprint of what exactly it's going to be like a month from now, 6 weeks from now, 2 months from now, once we get into the regular season. And more reps is just going to make this group better, not worse. And you kind of already know those 4 guys I just mentioned, and you can add Jacoby Myers into that as well. You know that those 5 pass catchers can play in an NFL game and in an NFL. We've seen it, right? They've played in real games before. They have tape in the NFL. They've done this throughout their careers, and it wouldn't shock me if this is a really good offense. Now we have to talk about the quarterback position because I think that's the one.
Can I just jump in real quick because I think this is kind of the transition you're making. What's been crazy is I thought Nelson Aguilar was the best player on the field this week. Any position, any side of the ball. Kendrick Bourne had one huge day, but he was good all week. Jacoby had a great week. Pretty much all the top receivers and one other guy who we'll get to later had a great week. And part of the reason that stands out is all the receivers, even when the quarterbacks were inconsistent, and both guys were inconsistent at times, and I know that's what you want to get into, but even with the quarterbacks being inconsistent, the wide receivers still popped.
Yeah.
And that to me is a huge, again, it's early, but that to me is an encouraging development.
Yeah, I was on a Buffalo radio yesterday. They had me call in and give a little report on what Pat's camp looks like. And I said to Nate Jerry, who's a great host there on Saturdays, and he said, how does the receivers look? And I said, it's tough because on one hand, you hesitate and say, okay, did the receivers in 19 and 20 just play so poorly that having an NFL professional receiver in Aguilar or in Bourne, does that just make those guys look so much better because of what we've seen in camp the last 2 years at that position, right? Like you're comparing Nelson Aguilar's speed and his ability to get behind the defense and stretch the field to Damiere Byrd, right? Or last year you're kind of comparing Bourne to like a Mohamed Sanu type of player. And these guys are just better than those guys. And that's a good thing. That means that they've made improvements there. How big of an improvement it really is once you actually go up against a live defense, that I think will be a question that will remain unanswered, right? We'll have to see when the games start and once we get into the season. But let's turn the page to the quarterbacks, because I still think, to me, I think we know at this point that those pass catchers we just mentioned are going to be good players for the Patriots. The quarterbacks are sort of the wild card, right? Like this offense is going to be as good as the quarterback play is for this offense this year. Now, Bill Belichick has continued to say Cam's our quarterback. He said it again yesterday. Definitively, Cam is our starting quarterback. He seemed a little salty about it that Ben Volen and a couple of other reporters kept on asking him follow-up questions to it. And
he did make the clean slate comment
earlier
in the week, but I think what he was saying is, because I'm sorry to cut you off. I just want to get this in because there was a lot of back and forth about this. Cam Newton is our starting quarterback, and everybody enters camp with a clean slate can both be true at the same time. Cam Newton, we said it yesterday, Cam Newton, as we sit on July 31st, is the Patriots starting quarterback, but that doesn't mean he will be the starting quarterback week one. Everybody is still competing. So I wasn't that surprised by either statement. I kind of get what he's saying. Cam's the starting quarterback right now. He's not the starting quarterback for week one. He's the starting quarterback right now. And that seems true based on the reps. That's true. I'd say based on the performance, that's true. But Bill saying Cam's our starting quarterback isn't a guarantee that Cam's going to be the starter in October. Right. So I think that people just kind of need to, those statements don't necessarily contradict each other.
And what we're seeing at practice kind of contradicts what Belichick is saying a little bit, right? Because I'm not saying that Belichick's lying to us. You made the point, right? That right now he's saying that Cam is the starting quarterback, which is 100% true. But I think what we are seeing out at practice is that Mac Jones is working with some of the, let's just call them key figures on the offensive side of the football.
Presumed starters.
Right. Presumed starters a lot. And if Cam is your starter and he's the one that's going to be starting all your games this year and there's no competition whatsoever, then having Mac throw to the other starters, having Mac work with the starting offensive line and having him do these things, that doesn't signal that, right? Like when Tom Brady was here in training camp in 2019 or training camp in 2018, we weren't covering the team at the time, but back when Jimmy Garoppolo was here, Tom Brady was taking 99% of the first team reps, right? Like nobody else was throwing to Rob Gronkowski and Julian Edelman and Chris Hogan and whoever it was, right? Like those guys were working almost exclusively with Brady. So watching practice, you see Mac also working with some of those starting players and also throwing to some of the key guys. And you say, okay, well, they're clearly getting him ready to do something, or they just want to put him with the best guys to see what he's got. Either way, they're testing him and they're trying to see how good he is going to be. But we can talk about Mac a little bit more in a second. I want to go back to Cam because I do think I have seen some steady progress from Cam Newton out at practice in the last 4 days. And what we have definitely seen is in structure, when the play goes as planned, when the defense gives him what he's expecting, much more in rhythm, timing, accuracy type of throws from Cam than what we saw in camp last year, during the season last year at times, and in mini camp in June. So when everything is going the way that he expects, and when he reads the defense and he comes up with things that he's expecting to see, you are seeing him make, to me, more high-level throws in this training camp than maybe we have seen him make in the past. They worked a lot in the red zone. He did have to throw a bomb to Nelson Aguilar on day 3, which was kind of like a wow moment from him. It was a great throw. And a lot of the throws that I have seen him make high level in the red zone are to the corner of the end zone, to the back corner of the end zone. The guys like Bourne, he threw one to Christian Wilkerson on day 4. He threw a couple to Bourne, some to Aguilar in the back of the end zone, where you see him get to the right read, make the right decision, put the ball in a good spot, and hit it in rhythm, on time, within the framework of the offense and with the playbook. That's what you want to see from Cam. Now, he talked about it after practice on Friday when we spoke to him, that the little bit of hesitation that he still has is when the defense changes, right? Like when he mentioned Devin McCourty's, you come to the line of scrimmage and Devin McCourty shows me something, and Kyle Duggar shows me something, and Dante Hightower moves over a little bit. And then it's like, kind of like, you got to reset the whole board, right? So when he goes into the meetings and he says, and Josh McDaniels puts a play up on the board and he says, Cam, defense shows you cover 1. Where are you going with this ball? He's got the answer like that. But when the defense changes on him and the picture changes, and then he has to make an adjustment on the fly, there's still maybe a little bit of hesitation. But I do definitely think that we've seen some improvements from Cam.
I do. And I think there's been specific throws too. There was one we talked about it a good amount. I think it was day 2, the one to Bolden, right? And we talked about it a good amount, where it was in the red zone.
Yeah.
Bolden runs an option route to the sideline, and Cam, just the ball's out before the turn. Nice touch, perfectly placed, like made the pre-snap read. Everything that Cam didn't do last year, everything that we said Cam needs to be better at, was embodied on that throw. Now, it's just one throw. He did make a similar one the next day to Gunner, right?
Right.
So you're starting to see the flashes of what needed to improve, right? When Cam said in the offseason, I need to be better at pre-snap reads, I need to not rush throws, right? This and that. He's so far, and it's early, I'll keep throwing that caveat out, but he's backed up what he said so far.
Yeah.
He seems to have made the adjustments, or is working on making the adjustments that he himself noted he needed to make. And that's huge. That's big, because if he makes those adjustments, you put that, like, the veteran in this offense, in this complex offense, is always going to have a slight advantage, just having that experience. So if Cam can make some of these adjustments, that's a big development.
Yeah, I think he's really has made some strides, like I said, on script, right? When McDaniels makes a call in the huddle, and then it goes out there, and the call that they make in the huddle matches the defense that they're going up against, and he can make a quick decision with it. His in rhythm, on time accuracy has been a lot better than it was last year. We're still getting to the point where he can kind of adjust on the fly quickly to adapt to a different defense or a different structure if the defense changes things post-snap. But pre-snap reads, what they're running and asking him to run at this stage, is very basic Patriot concepts, and he seems to have really gotten all that stuff down. I know we kind of differ a little bit maybe when I say this, but I feel like Cam's been the best quarterback out there for the first 4 days. I'm not going to say that it's been a landslide Cam Newton victory in the first 4 days of practice, but to me, the arrow is definitely pointing a little bit more towards Cam right now.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Cam's been better. I don't think neither guy has wowed me yet. I was kind of waiting for, and I wasn't there last year, but I remember that, there were a couple days where, just based on the reports, Cam was slightly ahead. I think Stidham had one day where everybody was like, oh, there's momentum. But then there was one day where Cam just lit it up, and his reps were double what Stidham's were, and he just performed better, and there was no looking back. So I'm not necessarily saying I was expecting that moment in the first week, but we didn't have that moment from either guy where it was like, whoa, okay, this guy was fantastic today, lit it up today. There's been throws, like individual throws, but even yesterday, which I thought overall was the best day for both guys, you had that 2 of 11 red zone period where Cam goes 2 of 7 with one completion on a screen, and Matt goes 0 of 4. neither guy to me has had that day where it's like, okay, like there is a clear advantage. That being said, yes, I would say with the little things in the details, Cam has been the better quarterback through 4 practices, but I'm still waiting for that, bust down the door, this is my job moment.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think we might get that from Cam once the pads come on.
I think so,
he's able
too.
to run around a little bit more and use his legs a little bit more, especially in those joint practices. I do also expect Cam to play a little bit maybe in the preseason games just because of all the new faces around him.
Oh, I think he's going to get a good amount of time in the preseason.
Yeah, so I think maybe we can have those types of moments as well. But let's talk about Mac because there has been, I would say, no hesitation in my mind that Mac is living up to being a first round pick so far, right? It's super early, but I haven't been out there and said, why did they draft this guy in the first round, right? Like this guy is not a first round talent. We've definitely seen some of those moments of first round talent. Plenty of them, honestly, probably, half a dozen, if not more throws where I've said, okay, that's why they drafted him in the first round. And we've had some issues with this with the Patriots. Like Nikhil Harry's first training camp, I was kind of like, did they really take this guy in the first round, right? Like,
were you? I thought he was great that year. It was just he got hurt.
Oh, no.
Maybe we saw it differently. I remember him like mossing guys.
The way that he was, I don't want to get too much into the Nikhil Harry discussion right this very minute, but I in terms of speed, right, and kind of dynamic running ability, I was like, all right, this guy's a big guy, but are we really seeing him pop off the field, right? Like, are we really seeing him run by people and be just a dominant physical presence? I never really saw that. I also never really saw that in 2018 out of Sony Michel, right? Like, I kind of, with him too, I was kind of
Sony's first camp was
a little bit slow, not really a first round talent. With Mac, I've definitely seen first round talent. There certainly are rookie moments and maybe some just moments of hesitation or moments of clarity where we see him all the time after the play when he messes up, going over to the receiver and asking, what did you see on this play and why did I mess up? You know what I mean? Trying to communicate with his wideouts, in particular, guys like Nelson Agholor and Mac Jones have had long conversations at times after plays to try to get on the same page and try to see the field the same way, which I think is great. I think that's a really good thing. But there are certainly times where you see in rhythm, gets to the top of his drop, makes a quick decision, ball is out at the top of the drop and on point. And those are the moments where you say, that's the Patriots offense. That's why they drafted this guy in the first round. And you kind of go down that entire road.
Yeah, I'm kind of still with Mac where I was at the end of the spring practices, which is you can see why he's a first round pick. There's still some issues that are worth ironing out, but nothing that's like shocking. All the things he struggled with are things you expect a rookie quarterback to struggle with. There's been no red flag where it's like, like that.
Right. It doesn't look like it's too big for him. It looks like he's comfortable on an NFL field.
Everything's fixable. And a lot of it's just consistency, which Bill talked about that when he was asked, what is he looking for in the quarterback position? He said, among all positions, he looks for consistency. And that's got to come along because Mac, he'll have his great plays, but there's probably more mental errors after those great plays than a guy like Cam Newton. But there was one play yesterday I saw, I think was the first moment that I kind of, I had to, step back a little bit. Was they were working in red zone and I'm trying to remember who it was coming around the edge. It might have been, no, it wasn't Kyle Van Noy. So it was a 2-number defender. I know it wasn't Judon. I know it wasn't Van Noy. It might've been Uche, whoever it was. Somebody comes around the edge, beats the tackle like around the back and steps up. And there's no way Mac could have seen him from the angle. It's on the blind side. I can't imagine, like, it'd be very hard for Mac to have seen him, but just before he would have gotten a hand on him, Mac just takes, it wasn't even a full step, like a half step forward and to the left. And the edge rusher goes right by him and he's able to step up and deliver the ball. And it wasn't a case of, oh, it's practice, I can't hit the quarterback. He legitimately moved off the spot so that the rusher wouldn't have a shot at him. And it was just like, you don't normally see rookies make that play. That's a play you see from a guy who's been in the league 3, 4, 5, 6 years. And that was the one where I was like, okay, that is a high level quarterback play. It was a very little thing. It was very subtle, but that's where he needs to come along. It's the subtleties that you can see he's picking up, and seeing that play, I was like, all right, that is, if he makes that play on Sunday, that's a touchdown. If he makes that play on Sunday, that's the one they're going back to during the week and pointing at what a great play this was. So that was really cool to see from him. And it's those moments that he needs to kind of start stringing together a little more consecutively, as is the case for any rookie. Again, it's all about consistency. But that play, like seeing that play, that's when I was like, all right, yeah, here we go. Now we're talking. Now we're cooking with fire.
Very, very good pocket movement quarterback.
Yeah.
Very nimble in the pocket. He isn't the athlete that Cam is in the open field, but when he needs to bob and weave and stuff like that in the middle of the pocket and avoid rushers, he certainly has all of those types of tools and those instincts in the pocket, kind of like a Brady, like a Russell Wilson, where you can kind of see that he has eyes in the back of his head a little bit, right? Like, and you kind of just feels the rush and is able to move around. Now, some of those plays I find are tough to gauge. Would it have been a sack in a game if you can hit the quarterback? Would it not? I think the one at the end of practice yesterday, I think it was Ronnie Perkins that was in his face.
Maybe that's who it was.
Yeah, and he let up a little bit because he's not allowed to hit the quarterback, obviously, in practice. Either Mac was going to get sacked or he was going to get laid out, right? One or the other.
And well, I'm saying there was another one that this legitimately, like, he got out of the way. He moved out of the way. The defender would not have been able to get to him even if he wanted to.
Yeah, he's very nimble in the pocket. That definitely stands out. The accuracy when he is in rhythm on time definitely stands out. I think the ball comes out better and maybe faster than I was expecting to. All those arm strength concerns. I don't know if you're going to dial up a far hash 60-yard bomb if you're Mac Jones, but I don't think that I see any issues with the arm strength. I think he's got zip on the football when he needs to and can get it into a tight window. There was a throw. It might have even been day one. It was a throw. We talked about it. Cam was cheering him on from the sideline. I was really pumped for him. He worked to the left side, moved the safety over with his eyes, and then dropped like a teardrop dime to Jacoby Myers in the corner of the end zone on a crossing route. And that was the type of throw where I was just like, that's nasty, right? Like, that's a high level quarterback play. That's what you're looking for. And we still need to see the consistency from him. As you mentioned, there's still a long way to go, but you see those flashes and those individual throws where you say, that's why it was a first round pick. That's what we're going to hitch our wagon to long term. They're in a really good spot, I think. And we're going to move on to the third quarterback that I wanted to bring up today, but they're in a really good spot, I think, right now with Cam as sort of the current starter and Mac as the long-term answer at that position. I think that plan, that bridge to the long-term answer in Mac is going as planned right now, right? I think that they're in a really nice spot. That maybe last year with the way that Cam played, we would be a little bit hesitant to say that. But at this time, 4 days in, I feel like Cam as the bridge and then Mac taking over eventually is kind of on track right now.
It goes back to what we said at the top of the show, right? You can see the offseason, the plan, the puzzle pieces, how they're put together. You can kind of see it all happening in real time. And you mentioned that throw to Jacoby. Mac actually made a similar throw on Friday where I think it was in 7s. It wasn't in 11s, but he's looking left like the whole way and even pump fakes, and the entire defense bites on the pump fake to the left.
Yeah.
And you had Gunner leaking out on a wheel, and you just as Gunner all alone up the sideline. Like, whoever I couldn't even see was covering Gunner because the guy bit on the pump fake so bad, but then just drops it right into Gunner up the sideline for the touchdown. So he's got a nice little pump fake there too. He kind of does the Phillip Rivers, the shoulder, right, instead of actually pulling the ball all the way out. But that seems to be one of his favorites from his toolbox.
There is just a lot of little instances here and there where you see these flashes of just really high level quarterback play from Mac Jones that makes you excited if you're a Patriots fan. Those little movements in the pocket, the pump fakes, the eye manipulation. These are next level types of quarterback things. This is not things that rookies in their 4th or 5th training camp practices are usually doing. Right. They're still swimming in the playbook and in all that. It doesn't look like that from Mac. It looks like he's still tinkering and he's still trying to figure out his receivers and figure out where he's going to place the ball exactly in certain instances based off of how receivers are going to run routes. But the framework and the foundation, I think he has a pretty good grasp of already in the early going, which is extremely impressive. We got to mention Jarrett Stidham just here briefly. It broke on Friday night. We haven't done a podcast since. Jarrett Stidham having back surgery, probably going to keep him out for a couple of months. I kind of put on Twitter that I sort of feel like maybe this ends with Jarrett Stidham going on IR for the year because they don't really need him this year.
Right.
Maybe next year they use him as a backup to Mac Jones if they don't re-sign Cam long-term. So I could see this year being sort of an IR year for Jarrett Stidham after this back injury. And it's a tough break for him because it was once pretty promising, right? His 2019 rookie camp was better than expected. I'm not going to sit here and say that he was the next guy or anything like that, but it was better than expected. You got to give him that, right?
I guess. You started this off by saying we have to talk about Jarrett Stidham. Is that because this is the last time you think we'll talk about him?
Yeah.
I don't know if you remember, and we unfortunately don't have it anymore. It was on the old CLNS YouTube channel. My reaction when they took Stidham.
You were not pleased.
You and everybody else telling me to calm down. It wasn't that bad.
Well, it was the fourth round pick, right? I mean, it wasn't like they drafted him with a top 50 pick. We just lost Alex. He'll be right back. And yes, Alex was not on the Jarrett Stidham train to begin with. I'll give him that credit. There he is.
Oh, there?
Yeah.
Back? Yeah.
Go ahead. Keep giving me the business about Jarrett.
That was weird. No, it's fine. I was just going to say, yeah, I think maybe he comes back on IR next year, but even still with back surgery, that's scary. And in all honesty, like I hope he's okay. And
yeah,
that's freaky stuff. It really is. Anything with the back. So you never know. And he's a guy I have trouble penciling him into their long-term plans right now. And it's not just a talent thing. It's, you have back surgery. I know they're saying 12 weeks, but they also said, it sounded similar to the report about Edelman's knee injury last year. Remember where that wasn't season ending. It's just going to be a month or two. And it was career ending. He never played again. So I think this is a major red flag for Jarrett Stidham's career, just physically.
I got a question on Twitter. Somebody said, how does Mac Jones's start the training camp compare to what we saw out of Jarrett Stidham as a rookie or even Jarrett Stidham last year, just to kind of get a barometer of what level Mac is on? He is light years ahead of Jarrett Stidham right now in my mind. And I think Jarrett Stidham, I don't think I've ever seen Jarrett Stidham practice as well as Mac has practiced in these first 4 days. So I don't think that there's any comparison there between these two guys. My only thought on Jarrett Stidham's long-term future with the Patriots is that maybe he is a quarterback that certainly stylistically fits a little bit more in the Mac mold, right? So as a backup, it's not a bad backup option. I'm not saying he's good. I'm just saying from a stylistic perspective, they do kind of align. So can Jarrett Stidham be Brian Hoyer? Right? Can he be Mac Jones's long-term backup like Brian Hoyer was for a while with Tom Brady? Maybe that's an option. And again, with Cam being the starter, at least to start the season, and Mac being the backup, that probably means that Jarrett Stidham's on IR this year. Maybe he comes back next year and can compete for the backup quarterback job behind Mac Jones, and maybe they go about it that way. But that's enough time on Jarrett Stidham. I think that we just wanted to mention it just because it was news.
No, it's news, yeah.
All right, so before we move over to the defense side of the ball, we wanted to give out some superlatives awards here for the first week of practice. Under the radar standout on the offensive side of the ball. We talked a lot about the key guys, the starters, the big guys, the big names. Give me an under the radar player that's impressed you. I have a feeling we might have the same answer for this, but let's just go ahead.
Somebody mentioned it in the chat. Christian Wilkerson.
Yeah, that's where I was going to.
Gotten off to a great start. He had the play of the day on day one. He caught a couple touchdowns yesterday. The real thing that stood out to me, though, was at one point, was it on Friday? I said something to you when this happened. It might have been Friday. He was working off to the side with Matthew Slater on gunning techniques. And that to me is significant because one, however good he looks as a receiver, he's going to have to play special teams to get on the roster. He's going to be that far down the depth chart. Two, if he's overdoing that during positional drills, he's not with the wide receivers. And that means like the coaches have to okay that. He can't just say, oh, I'm going to work with Matthew Slater now. So they clearly have a more specific plan for him. There was a report by Justin Mello when Wilkerson was in Tennessee last year or something similar, where he told reporters like he was stressing special teams. He was telling the coaches, put me on as much special teams as you can. Matthew Slater talked about trying to preach this to some of the younger guys.
Yeah.
How, they need to play special teams if they want to make it. You put all those puzzle pieces together, and he seems like a guy who's doing all the right things. And Isaiah Zuber's kind of been my guy for that 5th receiver spot, and special teams was a big part of that. I don't know. He's been fine. I don't know that he's popped the way Wilkerson has popped. Wilkerson's a more polished receiver as well. I just think, so far, and long way to go, have to put that caveat on, but so far, I think Christian Wilkerson has done a great job positioning himself for that final wide receiver spot.
We always go back to the Maurice Harris comparison because I think that was like the perfect example of this, right?
You loved Maurice Harris.
Okay, here we go again. In minicamp, right? Maurice Harris looks great. Nobody's talking about Jacoby Myers yet, right? Then we get to training camp and it completely flip-flopped. I think it was Doug Kyde who put out that meme of when like the guy's looking over his shoulder at another girl, and one of the girl that he's walking with is Maurice Harris and Jacoby Myers is the girl walking by. That's sort of how I feel right now with Zuber and Christian Wilkerson, right? We were all on the Zuber train after minicamp. He had flashed a bunch of times during minicamp. Now it's Wilkerson who's kind of taken that torch. I think pointing out that he's contributing and trying to contribute more on special teams is huge because he's going to be the 5th, maybe even the 6th wide receiver to make the team. And if he's going to be active on game day, he's going to have a huge role on special teams, right? He's not going to be active on game day as the 5th receiver unless he's contributing in the kicking game. So that's a big part of it, but he has ran really good routes. I think he's gotten open plenty, and he's contributing and playing with the other starters a lot of the time too, right? It's not, he's not mixing in with the scout team offense, and it's not Brian Hoyer throwing him passes. It's Cam and it's Mac throwing him passes a lot of the time. And he gets open. He's a very shifty player. You see some of that dynamic explosiveness. He's mostly going to work out of the slot. I think he almost caught a deep bomb from Mac Jones down the right sideline. They just missed on it. And he actually got behind the defense. I think that was against D Virgin or one of the scout team defensive cornerbacks. But regardless, you see the athletic testing that he did after his when he was a UDFA, I think last year, right? And at his pro day, he tested through the roof. He ran in the 4.4s, like a 6.7 3-cone or something like that. He had a huge pro day, and you definitely see some of that dynamic athleticism, the quickness. And when you talk to a lot of these guys, especially out at these like Patriots passing camps in the summer that we all kind of try to get the inside scoop on, right? When Jared Stidham held the thing out in Cali, a lot of these guys that are at these things are telling us, Christian Wilkerson's the next big thing, right? Christian Wilkerson's a guy that's going to come on and be a contributor. I've been impressed with him so far as well. He got a really nice pass from Cam yesterday. He's been open. He's a good route runner. He wants to contribute on special teams where he's going to have to be. I think that right now he's definitely the early favorite to be the 5th or the 6th wide receiver on the team, depending on what happens with Nikhil Harry.
So real quick, I found this quote, and I wouldn't be, this is from Justin Mello, whatever the Titans SB Nation blog is, Music City Miracles. That's a good one. I always enjoy the SB Nation blog names. They're fun. Anyway, I wouldn't be surprised if Bill Belichick signed Christian Wilkerson on this quote alone. So Mello asked him, how important is it to you to be able to contribute on special teams? Here's Wilkerson, quote, I'd like to play on every single special teams unit. If they can put me on all 4 units, that would be great for me. I'd be happy to play on every return team. I can run down the field and be a gunner. This dude apparently loves special teams, and that'll
help him make the team.
Absolutely. That's a great sign. And boy, if that's his mentality, what a better potential mentor for him to have than Matthew Slater.
Absolutely. All right, let's move over to the defense side of the ball because defense matters too. We'll do 30 minutes on offense, 30 minutes on defense. We are.
Well, wait, do I get to give my defensive sleeper, or are we doing that at the end?
We're going to do it at the end. We're going to do exact same kind of format. I think a lot of the questions are about on the defense, the second-year guys, Duggar and Uche. So I'm going to bring that up in a second, but also the new faces, right? Judon, Godshaw. How does Jalen Mills look? How does Dante Hightower look coming back from the opt-out? We can start wherever you want to start, Alex, but just with some of the newer faces on that defense and how it's kind of taking shape.
Yeah, so if there's one guy of the new players that's really popped to me, and this is odd because there's no pads, and he himself said it's tough to evaluate his position with no pads. Devon Godshaw has kind of been a menace.
He's a monster.
Especially in the passing game. I have him with at least 3 batted passes at the line. And I actually think I'm low on that number. It might be closer to 4 or 5. There's 3 specifically I can remember, but he's making it hell for the quarterbacks without even necessarily, breaking into the pocket. And that's a fun thought, because the Patriots haven't, I don't know that that's necessarily something they've really prioritized in defensive tackles over the years. They more so just want guys who are going to get in the way and open up opportunities for everybody else. But if Godshaw is kind of getting in the way like that, and he can keep knocking down passes and make that a regular thing, it's going to help them out a lot, because it just makes it easier to cover the middle of the field. You kind of know you have that one extra little line of defense in there. So that, among the new players on the defense, I think that's really stood out to me. I feel like at least once a day, oh, hey, that pass got batted down. Who was it? Oh, it's Devon Godshaw. Oh, again, awesome. So he's been really fun to watch, and fun guy to talk to too, by the way. He seems to genuinely enjoy being in New England, being a Patriot. Had a fun little back and forth with the media. So for a number of reasons, definitely got to get excited about.
He is definitely looking the part so far of that true nose tackle the Patriots really missed last year.
By the way, huge fan of Vince Wilfork. He brought up Vince Wilfork twice during his interview. The dude loves Vince Wilfork, which is fun.
Right. And if you're a nose tackle, you have 2 choices on passing situations, whether it's play action on first down or you're on the field in second and third down. You either got to be a penetrating guy, or you got to be able to get your hands up and get in the passing lanes, right? You got to do one of those 2 things to make yourself have some passing game value if you're a nose tackle. And he's at least getting his hands up in those passing lanes and swatting down a lot of passes. He's a built big dude. He looks like an absolute giant in the middle of the defense. Everything that you would want to see. Now, we haven't seen pads. We haven't seen true run game stuff yet. So that's what he's here for. So we still have to wait and see how dominant or effective he can be as a run stopper and a block eater. But so far, he definitely looks like you would want him to look. And I really think that that's going to be so massive for this defense. And similar to with the linebackers that are now involved, that this looks on paper and what we've seen out in the practice field like a Belichick 3-4, right? Like what Bill envisions, what he wants. We got linebacker versatility. We got depth at linebacker. We have a true nose tackle. We got some plugging 3-4 defensive ends and guys like Lawrence Guy, or even Henry Anderson, Christian Barmore, Dietrich Wise, I think is okay in that role as well. And you have some of these players and you see the pieces, and it looks like when Belichick defenses are really good in the front 7, this defense has that all on paper. And Dante Hightower has looked absolutely fantastic coming back from the opt-out. He has really flashed more in coverage than I think maybe he ever has in a training camp setting, where we're not hitting people, we're not getting into run game, and Dante Hightower is still breaking up passes and still being involved in the coverage a lot more than maybe you would expect. So he's moving around a lot, really, really well so far, I would say.
Yeah, and him adding coverage to his game just brings another element. We'll see, because he's always been a supreme downhill linebacker, and he definitely took some weight off, I think in a healthy way, but he took some weight off. So we'll see how he looks coming downhill. We might not see that till the preseason, but it just adds another dynamic. And we've talked about the depth at middle linebacker, and if Hightower is going to have more opportunities as an outside guy, then it opens the door for Juwan Bentley to play more. It opens the door for Raekwon McMillan, who had a very good first week. Why am I blanking? The kid from BYU, who was here.
Harvey Longy.
Harvey Longy had a good week. So if Dante Hightower, the more he can move around, the more it actually helps them flex their depth at linebacker, which is probably, correct me if I'm wrong, I think the deepest position on the roster. Linebacker / defensive end edge guy. So it's, I couldn't have pictured, I don't think you could script a better return for Hightower than what we've seen so far.
I mean, that's definitely the deepest group. And if Bill Belichick, the way that he builds defenses and the fact that he clearly wants to stick with this 3-4 system, you need to have that depth at linebacker, right? Like that, you're going to put 4 guys on the field, maybe 3 in today's NFL, because you have the nickel corner and stuff like that. But you're going to play 4 probably, if not maybe even 5 at times, if you're going to go into some pass rush packages. We haven't even seen Chase Winovich, right? Because he's on the PUP list. So they still have one more player to get out there and kind of integrate as well. So they have a lot of depth there. It's looked great. You guys looked good. Judon's looked good. I mean, I said to you off the air, I have a tough time putting a ton of stock in the front seven until we put the pads on. But at least what we're seeing so far, it has been a really nice look to what we can envision is going to be a very good defense. I do want to talk about Duggar and Uche a little bit more. Duggar specifically, he started to come on a little bit the last couple of days in coverage. I have seen some improvements. He broke up a pass for Nelson Aguilar. It looked like he was in maybe zone or kind of like a match zone type of coverage, and he was able to break up a pass on a slant to Aguilar, who's been open a lot and caught a lot of passes in camp. So you see him break up a pass on a pretty good receiver. That seems to bode well. He's had some moments where he's been a little step slow in coverage like he was a year ago. I think he is starting to click into coverage responsibilities a little bit more. And once we see the full pads and contact, I think we're going to start to see Kyle Duggar really start to come on.
And I just want to add, too, if we're going to talk about the safeties, Adrian Phillips has been the best safety on the field.
Fantastic.
He's been so good. He had one pass breakup on Jonnu yesterday. That was, I mean, it was such a good play where Jonnu probably should have caught the ball. It was a very catchable pass, but the way Phillips positioned himself, he didn't just break the pass up. He probably turned it into OPI. So he's been, I kind of talked about it at the beginning of training camp where he's in some ways, to me, I look at him as a guy, even though he's been in the league, I think it's going to be his 6th year. I look at him almost in the category of those second-year guys when you talk about the jump, and Bill Belichick always talks about the jump players make from year 1 to year 2, because he played a position last year he'd never really played. He had a role that he'd never played at this level. He said he hadn't played linebacker since middle school, I think. So now he has a year in that, playing that position. He has a year in the system. So he's a guy, again, even though he's a veteran, I can see him making one of those patented Patriots year 2, air quotes, jumps.
It's going to be tough to decide how they're going to divvy out these snaps, because Adrian Phillips, like you said, has been dominant at times covering the tight ends. He's been great. And Duggar, that it's going to come for him, and you want to get him out there and you want to get him experience and all that kind of stuff. So you have, I think, a logjam there of sorts, and Adrian Phillips has certainly played so well in the beginning of camp, and if this continues, you're going to want him on your football team, right? You're not going to want anything to do with moving on from him. So there is going to be, I think, a fight there, and then you mix Jalen Mills in that category as well, sort of those hybrid. He's more of a hybrid corner safety, where those guys are more linebacker safeties, but they do have some overlap of playing inside and playing in the box, and you have to wonder, where do all these snaps go and how do they get everybody on the field? Because Adrian Phillips right now has been probably their best defensive back in camp. I don't think that is I think that's
I'd agree with that. Yeah.
Unless,
the only way he hasn't been the best defensive back in camp is if you consider him a linebacker.
Yeah. Well, he's been playing a lot more true safety spots, I would say, in this camp than what he played last year during the season. Hopefully that's because they actually have real linebackers. No offense to Adrian Phillips playing linebacker, but hopefully that means they have real linebackers that can play linebacker instead of Adrian Phillips having to play linebacker.
Well, he can still kind of play that linebacker role. Like the role he was playing last year was a linebacker role, but he also had to play it on early downs in run situations because it was just they needed the bodies. Now they can use that role more selectively and not have him in those spots against the run as much. That, to me, is the big change.
Yeah, it's been a really good camp for Adrian Phillips. Josh Uche, we'll see when the pads come on if he can continue to. He is a tough dude to block coming off the edge. He really is. He's somebody that's got that great first step and ability to turn the corner. You pointed it out to me yesterday. Trent Brown, he got right around Trent Brown on one rep yesterday. He's a really difficult guy to block as well. We mentioned Hightower has been great. Judon, I think, is really in the same category somewhat of Hightower. Is such a physical presence in his way he plays and his playing style. That's going to really start to come on once the pads go on. But this defense in the front seven has really looked very good. I still sit here, though, and say the cover talent in the secondary after some of those top guys, J.C. Jackson, John Jones, Phillips, Duggar, once you get into the depth of this secondary, the Patriots, in my mind, in my eyes, are telling me don't necessarily have the depth that they have and had in years past, especially at cornerback. When you get past J.C. Jackson and John Jones, and you start getting into some of those depth corners. We don't have Stephon Gilmore's obviously not out there yet, but that top three is solid. But the fourth guy, the fifth guy, we continue to harp on it, but it does definitely. You get into that Mike Jackson, D. Virgin, Jalen Mills at outside corner. Jawan Williams has had some nice pass breakups, I would say, but he's also gotten burned a few times in coverage. It drops off pretty considerably, I'd say, in pure cover talent after those top three.
Yeah, we talked a lot about Jawan Williams and Michael Jackson coming in, and I don't know that either guy has put themselves aside. That, still a lot of time left. I can't wait until there's not a lot of time left so we can stop saying that freaking caveat. But that is, at a certain point, not yet, but probably after about the second preseason game, we'll start talking about where are they going to look externally? Where do they bring guys in after camp instead of maybe fill spots with their own guys? But if we were to, look really early, take a really early look at that, I don't think it's close. I think cornerback is the spot where they're going to have to look for an internal option to provide that depth behind Gilmore and J.C. Jackson on the outside.
Yeah, because it certainly has been a rough camp for guys like Mike Jackson and D. Virgin. I mean, not that we thought that D. Virgin was...
Virgin, he was a special teams guy before. Right. I don't think I would say looking at D. Virgin as a corner is like looking at Cody Davis as a safety. I'm not putting a ton of snap in his defensive reps. To me, he's competing with a guy like Brandon King. It would be Davis that gave Davis money, so he's going to make the team. But like the Brandon Kings of the world, I think that's more what D. Virgin's here for. He spent a ton of time with the special teams unit in positional drills. I don't necessarily know that he's here for, coverage reasons. I think if you get to that point, a lot has gone wrong.
Yeah, fair enough. Jawan Williams is the guy. I continue to sit here and say it, but Jawan Williams is
he should be the guy
that needs to step up and take those snaps that Jason McCourty walked out with, or at least share them with Jalen Mills, who I think is going to be involved in those snaps pretty heavily as well. And he's had some moments, like I said, he broke up a pass along the sideline against Nikhil Harry. He was in coverage with Nikhil Harry. It was a far hash throw for Mac, and he was able to jump it and break it up. He's had maybe 2 or 3 pass breakups in the first 4 days of camp, so he has been at least active in getting his hands on the football. But then there are still those instances where he looks a step slow out there, and he's not able to really lock down his man and gets beat. We'll see what things kind of get in between the 20s, if he can sort of handle speed a little bit better and handle those quickness a little bit better. But I still, that's the pick that's going to end up hurting them. If Jawan Williams is another Belichick second round defensive back, that's going to end up coming to bite them, because now is when they expected they were going to need him, and they do need him as sort of a depth option behind those guys, because you never know. You never know if Gilmore goes down, if J.C. Jackson goes down, they're going to need a starting outside corner, and it's probably looking like it's going to be Jalen Mills at the moment if that does happen.
Well, even besides those guys going down, and here I go again with this, Jason McCourty, right. Do you have the number memorized? Do you have the number memorized by now?
I think it's 60% of the snaps.
65. Jason McCourty played 65% of the snaps last year. He is now in Miami. Even when you factor in the time that Gilmore was hurt, you're still looking at over 50% of your defensive snaps at the outside cornerback position you have to fill. You'd like to think those would be Jawan Williams snaps. Right now, it's not necessarily looking that way, but they like to rotate those corners. Gilmore and Jackson are their 1 and 2, but part of the reason those guys look so good is they can strategically give them a series off here and there to keep them fresher than maybe the wide receivers they're going up against, not drain their stamina too much. The only way you can do that is if you have a reliable third guy. Jason McCourty was as good a third corner as you're going to find in the NFL. I don't know that they'll find somebody like him, but they can do better, I think, than what Jawan Williams has shown thus far, and it's kind of important that they do.
Yeah, I agree.
You'll have that number memorized soon. Don't worry.
Oh yeah, I basically do, and I still, how people, we're crossing sports here. I'm gonna do it anyways. How people with the Bruins always go back to that 2015 draft, right, where they passed on Matt Barzal and a couple of other really good players, and they ended up whiffing on the guys that they took, and everybody always says that was sort of the draft where they had an opportunity to add an influx of young talent to the core, and they weren't able to hit on those picks. the Juwan Williams pick, I'm not saying it's going to cost them a Super Bowl or something crazy like that, but the Juwan Williams pick was the pick that they had in mind to be able to move on from Stephon Gilmore, to be able to move on from Jason McCourty, right? And once those players aged out of their system and of their program, they were hoping that Juwan Williams, who was a top 50 pick, he was I think 46th overall in the 2019 draft. Yeah. They drafted him in the top 50 to be the guy that down the road when Stephon Gilmore was 31 years old and they didn't want to hand out a big contract to him, or when Jason McCourty aged out and retired or moved on because they were looking to integrate younger players. They drafted Juwan Williams with that in mind. Now the time has come, and I don't see Juwan Williams seizing the day, right? Like, I don't see him going out there and really solidifying himself as that player in that spot. And I'm not sitting here to go on some rant about Belichick's draft record and all that kind of stuff. And they did make up for it with J.C. Jackson as an undrafted free agent that year. So they got a good corner out of that draft. But the point is, or out of that rookie class, I should say. But the point is that pick was the guy that they had in mind to be the next guy. And Juwan Williams just hasn't taken the bull by the horns. And that's something that I think might come back to bite them a little bit.
Yeah, I've been a defender of Williams in that I don't think he hasn't played for the last 2 years because he's not a good player. He's just buried behind unprecedented depth. Like I just said, Jason McCourty as your third outside corner, that's incredible. And the fact that they kept those guys together as long as they did is impressive. But now that depth's not there, and we talked about this coming in, this was the kind of put up or shut up year for Juwan Williams. This is okay. There's no more blockage in front of you. You should have a chance to come up and play significant snaps at your natural position. And we haven't seen it from him so far. Still early. I think the preseason is still early.
All the caveats.
I think the preseason, we should just rename the show caveat still early for the next.
Yeah, still early. No pads.
I think the preseason is going to be really big for Juwan Williams. I'm hardly writing him off yet, but this is it. This is his moment. It's sink or swim for him right now.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, so let's finish this up with the under the radar defensive player that has stood out to us in training camp 4 days in. Go.
Rashad Berry. It's got to be Rashad Berry. I have him at 3 sacks. I was talking to Phil Perry yesterday. Phil has him at 4. And look, sacks in training camp are relatively useless. Sacks before the pads come on, it kind of doubles down. But at the same time, he has 4 of them. Nobody else does.
Yeah.
And he's a guy kind of like with Wilkerson, who we talked about before, is going to be able to contribute on special teams. He's been getting some significant special team snaps in team drills. And if he's going to keep flying off the edge like that, he's going to make it hard for them to not keep him. So he's been somebody who's kind of popped to me, and a guy I think they like. They elevated him a couple times from the practice squad last year. He has that positional versatility. He used to play tight end. They love guys who changed positions. They got a number of them on the roster between Gunner, Jacoby, J.C. Jackson. So he fits the mold, and he's off to a strong start. So he's somebody who absolutely deserves a closer look here when the pads come on and we start really seeing these edge rushers get after it.
Yeah, he's a guy, like you mentioned, that they called up a bunch of times off the practice squad last year with those COVID rules, where it was really easy to go back and forth. They called him up a bunch and had him active on game day a couple of times last year. I want to say he was dressed for maybe 4 or 5 games last year.
He played. I'll find the snaps. He played last year.
Yeah, he played a pretty good amount, especially in the kicking game. I think that he's certainly somebody that as we get into the deeper parts and really get into the competition setting of training camp, he could be someone that we are starting to say, hey, when we do our roster projections, you got to at least have him in the mix. It's a deep position. It's a tough position to make the team. But if he can contribute in the kicking game and he can rush the passer the way that he has the first couple of days, then he's going to be a tough guy to leave off. Maybe they can still stash him on the practice squad this year. And there's still those COVID rules have carried over to this season with the practice squad. So you can still move guys up and down for game day actives and stuff like that. So maybe that's still the role that he kind of fits into. But if he has a really good preseason, a really good training camp, and he plays well in these joint practices, against Philadelphia or the Giants, and he plays well in those 3 games, another team, he might not clear waivers, right? He might not get through waivers. So you have to consider that. The name that I
real quick, Rashad Berry last year, 3 games, 40 snaps on offense, 34 on special teams. So that's not insignificant. It's not.
Yeah, so he was playing. They had him playing basically tight end last year. More, you said offense, right? Or did you mean?
Oh, sorry, defense. No, 40 on defense. He didn't play any offensive snaps last year.
Yeah, that's what I thought. I was like, wait, where was he playing?
That's my bad. Well, because he was a tight end in college. He switched back, and I think they originally signed him as a tight end. He switched back and forth.
Yeah, they've listed him on the transaction wire as tight end / linebacker a couple of times when they were doing all those ups and downs from the practice squad. My guy,
40-34.
Yeah, my guy, it continues to be Montravius Adams. I just feel like I see 90 out there on the defensive line a whole lot. And that's sort of right now what I'm kind of putting stock into, especially with the linemen in the trenches, until, again, the caveat, the pads come on, right? We're looking at who's playing when, who's getting reps, who's involved with the starting defense, who's playing next to guys like Guy and Godshaw and Anderson and these Dietrich Wise and players are going to be on this team. I still see Montravius Adams potentially having a role on this team, especially because Byron Cowart has been on the PUP list and hasn't participated in any of these practices. Until that time comes, you have Christian Barmore, who is going to come along eventually, but the Patriots are not one to rush rookies into the lineup. So maybe Montravius Adams plays as that sort of inside penetrator until Christian Barmore is ready to play a bigger role in the defense later on in the season. So I think that's somebody that I have sort of circled as he's playing with some of the regulars. He's getting into the backfield a little bit. Another guy that I marked down with a training camp sack the other day. I think that he's someone that again, if Coward doesn't come back and doesn't start playing well, I think Montravius Adams could push him off the roster and could be sort of that bridge to Christian Barmore whenever Christian Barmore is ready to take on a bigger role. But two guys in Berry and Montravius Adams in the front seven, closer to the line of scrimmage. I really wish I could have given you guys a secondary player, right? Like we mentioned Adrian Phillips. I think he's too known to be truly under the radar, right? Like we know he's going to probably make the team. I wish I could have said Mike Jackson's had a great camp, or I don't know, even Jawan Williams might have been a little bit more under the radar.
I think I can give you, if it's not under the radar enough, let me know. Miles Bryant has
been good.
I don't know that he's had like a standout moment, but he's getting quality reps. He's getting quality reps and he's getting them often. And he seems to be somebody who they have a plan for. So I'm excited about that. I was a big Miles Bryant guy last year. I thought outside of that 1/2 against the Jets in week 17, he, put together a strong showing for a 5'9" rookie. So I like that they're keeping him around. I think he brings a unique element, and I'm excited to see that he's kind of getting some run here.
Yeah, the good thing about Miles Bryant is I feel like I haven't called his name a lot, which probably means that he's been blanketing the guy that he's been covering. So,
were you the one I was talking to about Jonathan Jones, or was that Matt Dolph?
Where probably Matt.
We were like, "Oh, hey, there's Jonathan Jones." We haven't said anything about him, but like in the best way, like Jonathan Jones. That might be the best internal contract Bill Belichick has signed in New England.
Great contract.
It's got to be up there. I mean, they got him for 3 years, less than $10 million a year. He's a top 5 slot corner in football. Just goes out, just so consistent. He's just total side note, but that was a great contract. Jonathan Jones, great player.
Yeah, really quickly, I kind of hope that they can do something similar with J.C. Jackson. I don't think they're going to get.
No way.
I don't think they're going to get as major of a discount with Jackson, but Jackson was an undrafted free agent. When you talk to him at the podium, he doesn't seem too concerned with making $100 million, right? I think that there is some wiggle room there. They discovered him. They developed him. I think there is a little bit of wiggle room. And I also think that if you load Jackson's deal with some heavy guarantees early on, like a guaranteed signing bonus, for instance, this is a guy that hasn't cashed in yet in the NFL. Right. So if you give him $30 million guaranteed as an undrafted free agent that wasn't even sure he would make a team coming into training camp, that's a really nice check. Right. Like it's kind of hard to pass up as a 24, 25-year-old player that didn't even know if he would necessarily have a role in the NFL. And now a team's handing him a $30 million check at signing. That is tough to pass up. I know his agent is Drew Rosenhaus. He's going to want more money. He's going to want to drive the hard bargain and hit free agency. But if you're J.C. Jackson and the Patriots and you can come to maybe $12.5, $13 million deal with a heavy guarantee up front. Maybe you can sort of make that deal happen, like with Jonathan Jones towards the end of training camp, right before the regular season. In 2019, they signed Jonathan Jones. I think it was like Labor Day weekend.
It was right before, because it was in between when Antonio Brown got cut and when he signed with the Patriots. I remember that.
Right.
So it was early, or it was late. Sorry,
Yeah. All right. Anyways, the last thing we wanted to do, last superlative here, if you will, the practice player of the first week of training camp. We might have the same answer for this one too, but I'll let you go first.
Yeah, it's got to be Nelson Agholor.
Yeah.
Even with, I think we got the full Nelson Agholor experience this week, because he had a couple of drops where, it's not like the ball hit him in stride right between the numbers, but they're balls you expect your number one receiver to catch. There was one deep ball from Mac Jones that was a little behind him, and he probably overestimated how behind him it was, and he couldn't readjust, and the ball hit the turf. And there was another one where it was Cam who threw the ball. He's running an out to the side of the end zone, and Cam, I thought it was a beautifully placed ball, just right out, like it was out of bounds. You know what I mean? And it's the kind of thing where you just extend out and grab it, and just went off his hands. He got to it. He got himself in the right position. He just couldn't secure it. But even outside of that, makes a great adjustment on a deep ball from Cam, like 2 or 3 plays later in the same practice. Made a number of nice deep grabs throughout the week. He seems to be really adept in the back of the end zone. They were throwing him some passes high in the back of the end zone where he can go up, get it, come back down, get his feet in. And I think that's who Nelson Agholor is. And it's going to be really interesting to see how Patriots fans handle him, because he's going to give you some spectacular moments. He's going to flash true deep threat potential, but there's just going to be drops in there. That's the player he is. And you just hope that the good outweighs the bad. And it did this week. And I thought he had a great week, even with the drops, but we'll see kind of how it goes as the season goes on.
I mentioned this in the beginning of the show. It's such a breath of fresh air for the Patriots to have a receiver in Agholor who can actually run and can actually get behind the defense and stretch the field, and as a dynamic weapon on the outside. Is he Julio Jones or whoever, Tyreek Hill or whatever you want to, top receiver you want to compare him to? No, but he is so much better than Damiere Byrd ever was. And Damiere Byrd, I think, still had close to 700 yards last year in that X receiver role for the Patriots. So if Damiere Byrd, with Cam Newton struggling last year in the first year in the system, all those caveats, can put up
600 last year, 604.
Yeah, can put up 600 yards in the offense as the X receiver. And Nelson Agholor is clearly a better player than him and clearly a more dynamic route runner than he was. I think that he had 900 something last year. And I think Agholor's could be 1,000-yard receiver if he gets the targets. I don't know if he's going to get the targets with the tight ends, but if he does get the target share and he has a couple of big games where he pops off on some deep balls, he might have a game where he's got 140 receiving yards or something like that. And if that's the case, then I think he could be pushing 1,000. He has been a very dynamic route runner and a really good field stretcher for them already in training camp. And like I mentioned, just a real breath of fresh air to see a guy that is actually NFL fast and can actually run and change gears and explode by somebody and run it with some route detail. There was one play early on in practice. Cam hit Jacoby Myers on a dig route. They're running dig post. It's a pretty classic route combination. And they had split safeties. That was the look that they got. And Agholor curved his route towards the sideline and then broke on the post. And he was also open. It wasn't necessarily a bad decision by Cam, but he was also open. I just love the little detail that he put in it to set up the safety for the break at the vertical part of the field and get downfield. He just runs good routes. He does a lot of things really well. It's really exciting to have a player like that can actually get behind a defense and do something good with it. The other player I would just mention, also a receiver, is Kendrick Bourne, who has really stood out as just a very sharp route runner, very consistent, understands where he's supposed to be in the offense already, which is a difficult offense to pick up. He is already getting to the spots where he needs to get to. He's got strong hands, ability to work between the numbers. It's really been a strong start for all the new pass catchers, but those two guys, seeing some real receiver talent, it's definitely fun and exciting. And before we really wrap it up, those are our practice players of the week. Nelson Agholor, Kendrick Bourne. Alex, I got to give you a minute to talk about the Madden ratings.
So
I know.
There's two things we got to do.
Okay.
The Madden ratings, and we do need to do a Boston sports.
Yeah, a lot has happened in Boston sports, yes.
So I don't want to talk about the ratings. I just sent you the list, and we talked about a couple of them, so you know a couple. I want one take from you on how Madden rated the Patriots, and then I'll give you mine. I want one from you.
Okay, so I understand with Madden, as you have explained to me, that a lot of it is how people compare to players at their position and not necessarily the overall rating against the masses, right?
Right.
So Michael Onwenu, for example, getting an 80, when you showed that to me initially, I was like, that's pretty low. Then you told me that's like the 17th rated guard in the league. So basically they're saying he's one of the better guards in the league because you have 2 starting guards in every team. So he's 17 out of 64 is pretty solid, right? So that's okay. Why Madden rated Damian Harris so low? I think they had you just tweeted it out.
I have it right here. Yeah, I sent you the list so you have it for reference. Sony Michel's a 79. He was, I think, 35th. James White's 78. Damian Harris is a 75. They are saying Damian Harris is the 53rd best running back in football.
So that I think is absolutely crazy and shows me that the Madden raters maybe put an emphasis, and I guess we could have like Andre on or someone like that to answer this question.
I think he's sick of talking about that.
Yeah, right. I think that tells me that the Madden raters put a little bit in longevity, right? Like Damian Harris only did it for 8-game stretch last year or something like that. And Sony has been a serviceable NFL running back for 3 years now. So maybe they look at it and say Sony's kind of proven himself a little bit more in the league than Damian Harris. But in terms of pure running skill, we see it every single week that Damian Harris, he glides. When he even in these practices when we're not really getting real true run game reps, you see it, Damian Harris kind of take off when he sees the hole. And he's a much more explosive back than Sony ever has been.
So I'll give you mine now. And it goes back to that, positional relativity. Jake Bailey as the 16th best punter in football.
So what happened? What happened there? Like
I can't tell you. I can normally kind of understand what they're thinking.
Right.
I honestly wasn't expecting him to be the best because they do put a tiny bit of stock into names, and Johnny Hecker's Johnny Hecker. He's going to be the highest rated punter in football.
Right.
Jake Bailey should have been in the top 3. He was an all-pro last year. He was the best punter in the league last year. I don't understand that one. Evan, let me ask you one more thing. Who would you say is the fastest player on the Patriots?
It's an interesting question. I think it's probably John Jones, maybe.
Okay, so that's who I'm because these are the things that show up on film. So this is where I'm really curious what you think. So they had Jonathan Jones as the fastest. Who would you say is the most raw strength? The raw strength?
Yeah. Probably Hightower or Judon, maybe Godshaw now, I guess, or Lawrence Guy. But
so they have Lawrence Guy and Trent Brown as the 2 strongest.
Well, Trent Brown is 400 pounds, so I guess that's somewhat fair, yeah.
And then who would you say is the best football IQ?
Oh, Devin McCourty.
So they actually McCourty was second. They gave it to Stephon Gilmore.
Okay. Oh, well, Stephon Gilmore is really, that's
fair. I'm not going to argue.
Yeah. I mean, his ability to read routes and anticipate routes based off of combinations and stuff like that is impressive. So, I would agree with that.
And then Cam Newton getting a 99 toughness, I love, because that's just going to draw a lot of extreme reactions from both sides. But I don't think it's inaccurate.
Yeah.
So there you go. You want to do Boston Sports Minute? That's all I got on Madden.
How do we want to start? We want to start with your rant on the Red Sox. We want to pour one out for David Krejci. Where do we want to go with this? I'll let you go off on the Red Sox for a second. Go ahead.
Yeah, that was so disappointing. And I think that I get that Chaim has the long-term approach in mind. And I actually don't hate that. But there were moves to be made that could have made this team better without sacrificing the long term. I don't think Anthony Rizzo went for that much.
Yeah.
I think that Kyle Schwarber is a good addition. I think adding both of them does make sense, but I think you could have gotten Rizzo for what you gave up for Schwarber. In Rizzo, you need a first baseman. I know they're going to try Kyle Schwarber at first base. He's never played first base. And people will say, oh, playing first base in the majors, it's easy. It's not that easy, especially when
taking the guy for like lesser, not to cut you off, but taking a guy for a little bit less in trying to move him to a new position is what the Rays do. It's what the A's do. It's what these money ball teams do. It's not what the Boston Red Sox
do. One thing if you have this great defensive infield and they're going to make it easy on him. Xander's an above average shortstop, but you have Devers, whose arm can be inconsistent at times, great range, but his arm can be inconsistent. You got a rotation at second base. I don't love putting a guy who hasn't played first base since high school out there with this infield. I don't think that's great. I also think part of the reason they did it is Schwarber's under contract through next year. So you get another year of outfield play. Hunter Renfroe's deal is a 1-year deal. He's probably going to be expensive if he keeps it up. He's probably on the way out. So they took the lesser player because they wanted tenure, even though he might not be as much of a fit. That's what the Patriots did when they traded for Mohamed Sanu. Like, definition, that's what the Mohamed Sanu trade was. It was, we're going to sacrifice fit, we're going to sacrifice ability because we want the tenure. And it's not always a bad idea. It was a bad idea here. I think they needed pitching. I don't know why they got the pitchers they got. They needed starters. They didn't need bullpen. They needed good pitching. They got bad pitching. I've been a proponent of trading Michael Chavis. I never thought he had a role in this organization. They should have traded him 2 years ago when he had actual value. He doesn't now. They still sold him short. They could have gotten more. So I think Schwarber's a nice addition in a bubble. You add a good bat. You add depth in the outfield, which they need. That's great. It wasn't their biggest need. They needed a first baseman. They needed a starting pitcher. They didn't do that. The other teams in their division got monumentally better. Berrios is a great addition for Toronto. I don't know why the Yankees did what they did. I think they're out of it. But Cashman must have been told it's playoffs or bust, so he gets aggressive. I'm a huge Joey Gallo fan. I think he's great. They get him with tenure too, and then they get Anthony Rizzo, who's a good player. So this is a major, major red flag for the Red Sox for me. I was really put off by this deadline. This has been a fun team. They felt like a team worth investing in. I don't think they needed to blow up the farm system to do it. But here we are. They didn't address their biggest needs, and most of the trades they made, I don't think either of those relievers are going to make a difference. I wouldn't have made either of those deals. Schwarber's a nice deal, but you're going to have to, kerfunkle the lineup so much to get him in. It's probably not going to be worth it.
Okay, so let's move on to the Bruins. David,
you don't have a take?
You pretty much summed it up. Okay. I feel like I was listening to your guys, Matt McCarthy and Maz, right at the trade deadline on Friday in the car ride home. And they were saying that maybe this means that management and Chaim Bloom and John Henry don't think that this Red Sox team is overachieved a little bit. And maybe think that this team is not quite World Series caliber yet. And to that, I say BS. Total BS, because they certainly have the talent. They're having Chris Sale come back. Alex Cora is an absolute wizard. That's just selling everybody in that clubhouse extremely short to say that they don't have a World Series caliber team. And that's why, if it was about the luxury tax, also BS,
that's
huge,
gross.
Yeah, that's disgusting. So the only thing I can think of is the big trades, maybe not for Rizzo, but for a Max Scherzer who moved or something like that. If the team's called and the Red Sox were trying to get involved in that, and they were like, give us Tristan Cassis or give us Duran or whatever, I can understand why they didn't want to make those moves, right? I understand why they're not going to give up their best or second best prospect in their farm system for 36-year-old Max Scherzer. I can get that. So I don't know. It was a tough spot to be in. I thought that they could have they got Schwarber, who I like. They could have made another move like that, right? Like you mentioned, a Rizzo, for example, and put both of those guys on the team. I think that would have been they would have been better off with that.
If they had added Schwarber and Rizzo, I would honestly call that a great deadline. It was the first base thing. Even a guy like CJ Cron from Colorado, who I don't believe ended up getting moved, you can give up your 25th best prospect to get him, and you just get so much better offensively and defensively at first base. There were marginal first basemen, the Doug Mankeviches, the Steve Pierces of the world. Right? They've made those moves before, and they've made major differences, even though they didn't cost a ton. That guy was out there to be had, and they just didn't do it. And that I won't and they could have done it and stayed under the luxury tax. I won't understand why they didn't make a move like that.
All right, quickly pouring one out, at least for the time being, for David Krejci. Yeah. He could be back, I guess, eventually, but Ty Anderson put that he's got to clear waivers, and there's all sorts of obstacles to getting him back on the team after the Czech Republic season ends. To get back on the Bruins for the playoffs is a lot harder than you'd think or you'd want it to be. So David Krejci, at least out for this year with the Bruins, leaves a really big void, I think, at second line center or maybe third line center if you feel like Charlie Coyle can play second line center. The guy, it's Jack Eichel. Taylor Hall's Jack Eichel's buddy from Buffalo. Have him convince him. Jack Eichel's from here, right? I believe he's from the New England area.
Yeah, he's from very locally. I'll look it up, but I think
that's the trade. That's the move.
North Chelmsford.
Not only is Jack Eichel a great player for you to go for another run with Bergeron and Marchand and this, what's left of the core, but also a great move for you long-term because he's a guy that could maybe replace Bergeron someday as that top line center, right? So I just love the idea of bringing Jack Eichel in. I know he's got some injury stuff going on right now, but that would be awesome. That would be an absolute home run if the Bruins can pull that off. They still need a left shot defenseman. They still need a first-line pair defenseman, I think. I don't know if Grzelcyk is truly there's a lot of holes on this Bruins team still.
Yeah, we'll see what happens. I think Eichel, is a possibility just because he wants to be here. He's a guy. It would have to be an NBA type of thing where Eichel says, I'm only going to Boston.
And it's his hometown team. Right. Taylor Hall's his buddy. They can play together again here with the Bruins.
It would be like Durant and Harden teaming up in Brooklyn, where they liked playing together. They just hated where they were. Right. They still want to play together, but elsewhere. So there is some NBA elements. We have seen in the past in hockey, guys will threaten to retire if they don't get traded to one specific team. Normally those guys are in their 30s. Eichel's much younger, so not necessarily, but I'm not ruling it out that he basically says either send me to Boston or I'll go play in Europe or I'll go, whatever. So that's how it has to happen. With Krejci, it's crazy because, now Chara's gone, Krejci's gone.
Krejci was a great Bruin too.
Right. Rask, we don't know. This core that's been together for an unprecedented amount of time. They were the young guys in that 2010, 2011 run, and now they've been the veterans. We're pretty much down to Marchand and Bergeron, and I think Steven Kampfer is still kicking around in Providence. But it's really, massive end of an era feeling for the Bruins. It probably won't truly hit until Bergeron leaves, but he's, Marchand's kind of in between. He was on that 2011 team, but he is significantly younger than Bergeron.
Was he a rookie in 2011? I want to say
he might have that year or the year before, but he, it's Bergeron's basically the last one left from, assuming Rask is done, which he might be. Bergeron's the last one left from that group.
Yeah. Trader Brad. I love it. I love the moves that they've made so far. It seems like they're trying to set up maybe another bigger move here with some of this, Tristan Thompson trade and Jordan Richardson. I don't know if he'll actually be on the team or not. That could be another move. I know the Miles Turner thing has sort of resurfaced. The name that obviously all of us want is Bradley Beal. I don't know if that's going to happen this offseason, but Brad Stevens making some moves, and maybe he can sort of correct the wrong and get Miles Turner when Danny Ainge wouldn't pay the price.
Yeah, even the moves themselves, I know we talk about there's another bigger move coming, but I've always really liked Chris Dunn since he was at Providence. I think he's a good player. I think he plays their style of basketball, and I thought Tristan Thompson was a waste last year. I think getting rid of him is huge. I would like to keep Moses Brown to keep the front court depth a little bit, more together, but they can go find somebody else. Josh Richardson's another guy where if you get the player he was in Miami, and I know he had a rough year in Philly, but who doesn't have a rough year in Philly? If you can get that Josh Richardson, these are good moves. And this is in a conference that's becoming dominated by just offensive superstars. Giannis, Durant, Kyrie, they are building themselves up to be a defensive juggernaut. And some people call that boring. Some people will call that a dated philosophy. I love it. Make every single basket your opponent has to score against you count. I think that's great. I love the new identity this team's taking on. Brad won the MLB trade deadline in Boston. I didn't see it coming, but he did it.
Trader Brad. All right. Thank you for humoring us.
We only lost about 30 people.
We only lost about 100 people there towards the end. So I understand. We're going long here. First hour is football talk for people that are like, why the heck are they talking about the Celtics right now?
Yeah.
First hour of the show is football talk. Alex and I will be back on the podcast tomorrow afternoon after day 5 of training camp. We will definitely be on Tuesday night as well, following the first day of full pads at training camp down at Foxborough on Tuesday. So an exciting week. Things are going to really start to pick up. The competition is going to really begin on Tuesday when the pads go on, and we will have you completely covered here on Patriots Beat with reactions after every single practice. So keep it right here on Patriots Press Pass, Patriots Beat podcast, and CLNSmedia.com, and read Alex on 985.com as well. And you can find his written work there too. But thanks so much for listening, guys. We'll see you guys again tomorrow. And again, we'll have a huge show on Tuesday night after the first day of pads as well. But until then, signing off for Alex Barth, I'm Evan Lazar. Thanks for watching, everybody.